Welcome to this edition of the Dean's Video Newsletter. Today we're actually coming to you from the new Physiology and Pharmacology and Anatomy labs. These labs are state-of-the-art, incredibly well designed, and you should come by and have a look at them at some point. This is the direction that we're moving in the school in our ability to use areas for teaching for multiple different aspects of our teaching. Today we're going to talk about two very specific things that are important to us as a faculty. One is an area that might sound initially to be a little bit about alternate workloads. What are we talking about there? And the second one is a critical one to anybody who's involved in an academic organization, and that is the process of promotion and tenure and what is actually involved with that. To tackle the first one, the issues around the alternate workload agreements. At this university, we're really quite governed by what is called the collective agreement. This is actually an incredible document. If you have an opportunity to look at it, it does exist on the website. Most faculty are aware of it. I would suggest probably most haven't read it in detail, and it's certainly something that I would never have had to read in detail before becoming the dean. But it helps provide guidance to us on a lot of areas as to how do we function as a professoriate, how do we function as an academy, what are the guidelines around workloads and such. And a typical workload is really divided up between research, teaching, and service commitments. And a standard workload across the university would be something called a 40-40-20. So 40% of your time spent on research, 40% spent on teaching, and then 20% spent on service. And there are terms of reference underneath each of those. Each faculty, to some degree, defines what a teaching load might look like, what the number of hours are. And clearly that's going to be different amongst faculties and even within individual faculties, depending on the nature of the kind of work that you're doing as an investigator or as a teacher. Service really is contained in about 2 paragraphs in that document. And service talks about service to the community. And there are some very prescriptive components to that. But it also allows a fair bit of leeway. When we talk about community, at least in my mind, we talk about community as being the academic community as well. So what are you doing that is helping to support not only your colleagues here, but colleagues nationally and internationally? So are you on peer-reviewed panels? Are you helping and working towards getting grants moving out the door here that are well-reviewed, internally looked at? Are you helping with the committees within the departments? All of these things that are fundamental to our vitality as an academic community. All of that gets buried within what we call a standard workload. There is an opportunity to have what are called alternate workloads, and many people, particularly in our faculty, have these alternate workloads. So they may have, for instance, 75% of their time directed towards research endeavors, and then 15% to teaching and 10% towards service. It creates a bit of problems for us when we have those kinds of workloads set up as being a standard alternate workload. The first thing that I would say is the vast majority of people simply just do their job and work. So for most of us, we teach, we do administrative, we do service components, we continue with our research activities, and I'd be extremely hard-pressed to find somebody who could say to me, gee, Mike, here's my 60% on this, or here's what my 10% looks like on that. Because we just do it. It's the nature of what we do. The flip side, however, is that it does create some problems when it comes time to looking at promotion or advancement, when we're trying to identify what are those constituents made up of. And so, for instance, somebody who's brought on board and has research intensivity, and this doesn't have to be at the bench. It could be in clinical trials. It could be education scholarship. It could be any of those areas that we focus on it. Well, if they're also incredibly involved on service with that, they're involved with national peer review, they're involved with journals, they're involved with helping mentor and develop groups here. We have very little opportunity to recognize that when most of it is held aside into the more research-intensive component to it. So one of the things that we're doing as a faculty is that we are moving towards an alternate workload which will be 60-20-20. So whatever your research intensivity might be, the maximum that we would be looking at would be 60. And then we'd be looking at a 20% service component and 20% teaching in there. And I remind people that teaching includes your graduate students, what you're doing in your lab in terms of educational seminars, but it does definitely include our teaching to why we're here, the larger population of students as well. It'll give us much more room to kind of maneuver and recognize people for the tremendous amount that they're doing on the service side, which we value so heavily. So you'll be seeing that come forward. To those who have workload agreements that are different, we'll be looking at those as they come due over the course of the next year or so, or sooner. But I know this is already out there. We've been starting to implement it. A lot of people have been asking why we've been doing this, and I thought it was a critical issue to just kind of get it out there and say this is going to allow us to recognize things much, much better, create a much more even playing field. The other question that I get that goes along with that is, does that mean we won't have the ability to take a brand new individual, wet behind the ears, coming in their first year as a prof, and protect them even further for that? And the answer is, of course, we'll always do that. Every departmental chair will need to have the capacity to look at an individual who's just been recruited on and do everything that we can to ensure that they are academically successful and move forward in our faculty. So it's a change that you're going to be seeing. It's a fundamental change. It is one that as a dean I get to actually lay out as part of a vision as to what we want to be doing in this faculty and how we move our excellence forward. So certainly stop me in the halls, be happy to answer any questions around that. It is at the core of us as professoriate. The next issue that I want to talk about is one that's even broader than that, but equally as specific, and that are the issues surrounding promotion that occur in this faculty. And oftentimes when we think about our faculty, we think about it as being physically right here, right, London. Our faculty actually extends across all of southwestern Ontario. We have to remember at all times that we are both a clinical and a basic sciences faculty. The teaching that I need to have done of our medical and dental students are done by individuals who come in from the community or who are in the community themselves, and our students go to them. It's part of our distributed medical and dental education system that we have here. It's part of our Windsor program. It's part of what we have going on in Goderich and Leamington and all points within this area. We actually have over 45 different centers where we teach our medical students and increasingly our dental students as a component of all of that. Here within our own faculty, we have individuals who are fully tenured and have become full professors over their careers. We have others who are clearly just starting out on it. I get a lot of questions about adjunct professorship. Is that just a default category that we have here? And the answer is, it is not. Here as a university, we have very clearly recognized the role of an adjunct professor. It is part and parcel of the professoriate. It comes with certain privileges and activities. It comes with certain rights, particularly on the clinical side with regards to what you can do. But it also comes with certain responsibilities as well. And so it's not simply a title that we would apply to an individual and say, well, great, let's have you around for a bit of time and see what goes from there. It is not the same as an assistant professor. As soon as you start to move past that adjunct into an assistant professor's time period, a clock starts. And that clock is incredibly meaningful. That clock is the time for you to move to your next promotion. And it is very defined. It's slightly different on the clinical side than it is on the basic sciences side. It's shorter on the basic sciences side. And this is something that changed a number of years ago. On clinical side, you have 7 years to move forward with your promotion. You can get an extension to bring it out for 10. All of them have capacity to deal with paternity or maternity leaves and other aspects of that. But it's a window of 7 to 10 years. On the basic sciences side, within 6 years of your arrival here, we need to have moved you along in a promotion. In today's climate, that's an incredibly difficult task. In the research where we're getting less than 16% of CIHR funding, when NSERC and SHRC funding are extremely competitive, getting yourself established as an investigator early on, getting your publications moving forward, getting granting in place is no easy challenge. And you have to have those things in place, as well as excelling at your teaching component. When you're teaching large classes or small classes, you're going to get evaluated. There are going to be scores that go along with that. We're going to be looking at those. Your review panel is going to be looking at those, as will the external reviewers. So that first 5 years of that clock ticking in your life is a very, very important one for it. Moving on to become a professor is not a function of time. Moving on to become a professor is an honor. It's a recognition by your colleagues that you have achieved a standard of excellence in teaching and research and excelled in one or the other of them that places you at an international standard. right? And that last piece is really critical. We look at that closely. It is, where do you stand on an international platform? I'll use an analogy. Oftentimes, particularly when I was a chair, when I was recruiting young individuals in and we were talking about what their career would look like, I always asked them a question. In 5 years' time, if I was holding a national conference, why would I ask you to chair a session or be a plenary speaker? What would there have been in your career that you had done that would have identified you as being that good that on a national basis, I wanted to bring you to the table? At the professor level, the question should be, if I'm organizing an international conference, why would I ask you to be a plenary speaker? Or why would I ask you to come forward and chair a session for us? Sounds like a simple thing, but when you think about the details behind that, it means that you have developed that reputation, that you are identified as being a national or an international expert in your field, and we get to recognize that in here. So not everybody will get to be a full professor, okay, and get that promotion. Lord knows it doesn't mean a lot more money at the end of the day. It is the recognition of excellence that you've done. It's not pejorative that you don't get into that category, but it does mean that we are going to be looking for very specific standards in that. At this university, we have something called the Distinguished University Professor, DUPS for short. That's meant to be 2% or less than all the professoriate here. And those are the individuals that are recognized by the entirety of the university and community as having excelled in all areas of service to the university. And that is service, teaching, and research. So that's a very rare group to move into there. What we as a faculty get to do is talk about the expectations. What are the bars that you need to pass to get to all of those levels for that? And those bars get to move a little bit. The idea is they move up. We shouldn't be moving them down. And so I do get an awful lot of questions being asked to me about, geez, Mike, I hear that you're really pushing the bar a little higher with regards to promotions and making it a bit more difficult. And the answer is yes. Is that an intentional thing that I'm doing? Yes. Is it because I value the tremendous skill sets that we have here amongst our professoriate and I want to see us recognize them appropriately? The answer is yes, that's what we're trying to achieve. There are a couple of other pieces in there that are absolutely important and critical in all of this. As you're building those dossiers, there's lots of help here. We're doing it in the communities. We're helping in our distributed education network. We're helping here locally. What does a good dossier look like? But part of that dossier is your contribution if you're asked to provide a letter of reference. And I got to tell you, it's amazing the amount of time that is spent by individuals putting letters together in support of their colleagues. Having just come through a whole session of all of these, all of us want to make sure that we express our appreciation, and certainly I do. To those of you who have done this, it's huge. When you're asked to do it, it's an honor. Provide a very critical analysis. We look at that. We're very, very attentive to the comments that come from students, to the solicited comments and the unsolicited ones from peers. As an external reviewer, this is a critical document. We look at those with great detail. So when you're selecting the individuals that you're hoping to have provide your external reviews, talk to your colleagues, talk to your chairs, talk to people who are on the promotions committee to get an idea as to what sort of an individual should that be. A letter that just kind of says you're a great colleague and a wonderful friend and we love your talks doesn't help us. One who comes forward and says your contributions place you in the top 5 or 10% of your peer group speaks volumes and changes things right away. So this whole concept of promotion, of our workloads, of the times that we spend trying to deliberate and decide how we move people forward, it's at the core of what we do as a school. If we're going to attain the heights that we want to attain, and we're moving in that direction very nicely, this is part of that. And so I wanted to take today's time to really get this message across. I have a lot of emails and a lot of queries on both of those, so I thought, why not just talk about it openly today? The alternate workload is really meant to recognize the skills that you're bringing to the table and give us more room to do that. And the whole promotions thing is an important piece of being part of the academia here. We take it incredibly seriously, and yes, we are moving the standards forward a little bit. And yes, that's a little bit painful to go through, but at the end of the day, it should be as meaningful here as it would be at Harvard or Yale or anywhere else to get those promotions in play. So, happy to answer any questions in the hallway or over a cup of coffee or anything on those fronts, but I can tell you your chairs also fully understand exactly what we're trying to achieve. So with that, I'll thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you on our next one. Take care.